question I have is, why are we not living in a smart home? And do you think we will ever live in a smart home? The reason I ask this is, smart home as a concept is not very new. It has been around for some time. Prototypes after prototypes have been built for the last 10 years, or even longer amount of time. So, is it real? Just to clarify, what does smart home mean? So, if you look at typical literature, or if you Google about smart home, people talk about a refrigerator which understands its content and can make automatic order for grocery, or people talk about washing machine which can talk to electrical grid. Many such examples, or maybe using a gesture control, you can control your TV, or the TV is so intelligent that when you are picking up your mobile phone call, somehow it understands that and turns down the volume. So it gives you, so it's a smart home as a concept was intended to give few things. First, reduce your mundane work, everyday work, and it also supposed to make the life more comfortable. And of course, there is always a new innovation or coolness factor around smart homes. So these kinds of concepts were always around, but how real it is. So there I probably want to relate to some of my personal examples or the things which I saw around. So to make a conclusion, hey, is it a hype, or is there some bit of substance to say that whether a smart home as a concept is really going to help in the users in some way? Because without the need, there is no market. Now, the interesting thing is, I lived abroad for more than 10 years, and every time I looked at smart home, I thought, hey, this is some kind of hype, pushed by technology or even Hollywood films, right? There's nothing real about it. But in the recent past, last 2 years, I have changed my mind a little bit. I mean, let me relate to some of the stories with you. The first one is extremely recent one, and I don't know how many of you have read a story which came in Times of India, and this was written by a woman who the title was, "My father could not have died if only." I don't know how many of you have read. So the story is about this man who is 77 years old, and he is in care of his nanny because he has dementia. He can't take care of himself. See, he wandered off. For some reason, the house door was open. He wandered off. And what happened? And he couldn't find his way back. There was nobody to help. And 2 or 3 days later, he died. Why is this relevant to something like a smart home? So assume that if you had something at your home, you had some kind of wireless gadget, which could sense, hey, this person, he can't take care of himself, but he's moving out of perimeter, and if that gadget had alerted the nurse, who was sleeping at that point of time when this guy walked out, one life could have been saved. So there are there is one instance where I could see it as real. The other instance also is my personal example. So we were doing some kind of ethnographic research in rural UP, and we were trying to find out how people use electricity, how does electricity affect their lives. The interesting thing we found, we went to a middle class household, and we were talking to this woman, and what you find is there are a bunch of appliances. There is a washing machine, there is a microwave oven, everything stacked, and there are a lot of books stacked on top of it. And you see, we asked them, why? Is the machine not working? No, sir, it works fine. And she also explained she had to take a loan. She bought a second-hand machine because she has a lot of domestic. These are farming populations. They work day to night. So I asked, why are you not using it? And she gave us a story about this twin shortage they face. The twin shortage is, one is the electricity in that rural UP comes at 3 at night. Middle of the night when everybody is sleeping, and of course, to run this machine you need electricity. The other thing is water shortage. The water is also erratic. You don't know when it will come. It will come once in 10 days, once in 15 days. And if you hear a story, it is like every day, she has to wake up, see when the power is on, whether the water is on, and run this washing machine. Surely, today with the technology today, you can provide a very cheap solution. All you need is a plastic tank with a water sensor. You know the water level. If water is there, power is there, turn the machine on. How expensive it is. And this woman loses sleep every day. And I can relate this story to other middle class households in Bangalore where people wait for water, wait for hours. So if you know that when the water is coming, because people have to fill up their buckets because they don't have a sump or a tank, they can't afford that. What can you do? I mean, if there is a message which goes to their phone or it beeps, everybody has a cell phone today, almost everyone has. When the water comes, don't you think it gives them comfort? Don't you think it improves the quality of life? So I can go on, a lot of personal examples I can go on. Yes, if you look deeper at the user, definitely there are places there is an immense value for smart homes. So I think smart home as such is not a hype. Now then it comes back to the question, why are we not living in smart homes today? So what I thought is maybe it's a good opportunity to maybe look at how it had evolved. Maybe when you look at the past and the present and look at the problems, maybe you can find how it will evolve in the future. So I mean that was the thought exercise I had. So interestingly, the first thing I found out was, hey, this concept is not 10 years old or 20 years old as I thought. It is more than 100 years old. The first patent on smart homes was filed by Tesla. He had filed a patent on remote control using some kind of wireless to control appliances. That was 1898. Of course, not every home had electricity at the time. So I mean, maybe it was way ahead of its time. And the second mention of smart homes I could see was around 1950 to 1920. A very interesting, what you call, social trend, which led to some kind of smart homes. This was primarily related to heaters and washing machine. The trend was many people in US and probably in Europe, they started working in factories. Now, as a result, people didn't have domestic help, and I think many of us can relate to this problem if you're living in India. Couldn't find enough domestic help, and then there was automation. But again, it was confined to a niche because electricity penetration was not there. There was no electronics. Pretty much there was no electronic industry at that point of time. And then there were really science experiments in around 1960 by Honeywell and few others, where they had created a prototype of a smart home which would understand what grocery you have and tell you what kind of recipe would fit into your grocery. So many of these concepts had existed, but I think what we saw, the serious installation of smart homes, you could see around 90s, and that was primarily driven by microprocessor revolution. Computing was getting cheap, and there was electronic industry. And the first, kind of smart home concepts came from the building management system, the BMS guys, I think. And they had, applied their, whatever they were using in industrial control or building management, they had taken into the homes. And what was the result? The result was that, was confined to only the visionaries like Bill Gates, who built few of these houses. The reason was it was way too expensive, and it is not hard to guess why it is. I think the concept was way ahead of technology. We didn't have there was no short area network, no Bluetooth or those kind of technologies had not evolved at that point of time. There were issues around people, each of these vendors having their own proprietary networking, which again resulted in very complicated integration, and high degree of maintenance was needed. You need to be a CIO to run your smart home appliance. And the third factor was also that the remote, which you need for smart home, it was not there. If you imagine controlling your home from a PC, because all you are trying to avoid is walking to your machine, why would you walk to your PC? So that the remote control, what we see today in everybody's hand, the smartphones or feature phones, that ecosystem was totally missing. So as a result, what we had was a proprietary end-to-end solution, which was very hard to maintain and well out of reach of the common man. So that was 90s. Now, what has happened from now, from here, right? From today, it is 20 years from now. What has happened? What I found was, beyond what I think, the usefulness of smart homes, there are really good trends, societal trends, which are in its favor. And of course, there are barriers, which I will talk about a little bit later. Some of the, the societal trends, you see, the first thing is people are, a lot more busy and a lot more affluent. And if you take especially emerging markets or even otherwise, other markets, people are willing to pay for this convenience. And there are a lot of these, convenient gadgets, which you see out, not in India, maybe outside, where somebody can, adjust their window sill to, or their curtains to let right amount of light, right? There are applications, which are, or you could control your television using a gesture, sitting on your couch. So you don't need to even lift up your remote. So that level of convenience that offers, that is, something which people always have willing to pay for. But today, people are more willing to pay for. That's one trend I feel is positive. But there are other, stronger trends. People, the need for peace of mind, and especially I'm, talking very much, from a Indian context. Compared to 90s, both husband and wife are going for work. Children are alone with a nanny. They have old parents who live far away from them, which is also true in the Western, in some extent, to the Western world. So there is, need for peace of mind, kind of solution, where people can sit remotely using cameras. They can monitor something. They can monitor their kids, or it may be that the concern you have. Oh, when I left the home, did I turn off the gas? Would it create an accident, right? So there are things like that, where you want peace of mind. Or did I lock the door, right? So there are applications you can provide where you could use your cell phone to actually check your gas meter, or you can check whether your doors are locked. You can find whether your parents are okay or kids are okay. So that is the peace of mind, the need for peace of mind, is another trend which is in favor. The third one, which I talked a little bit before, was society is aging. India, maybe still young, but if you look by the absolute numbers, we have a lot of aged people. And a lot of us know who come from the second-rung town, move to a bigger city. A lot of our parents have preferred to stay back because of quality of life. And these people, need support. Especially those are the application for health, or the monitoring. For especially if people suffer from dementia or some other debilitating illness, you want to monitor them. Or it may be as simple as these people are so old. Maybe sitting on the couch, they want to see if somebody knocks the door, they want to open the door automatically. Old people would prefer that, or find out who is knocking the door, because there are cases of mugging and murder. These cases are also on rise. So those societal trends also help in people adopting smart homes. And the other trend, I could see is also, some of them are regulatory trends, right? The utilities have deregulated, and as a result, they have the tariff changes, time of the day, and that has created opportunity for intelligent solutions within homes, and in certain markets, especially Europe is the strongest market for that. So again, people are more green conscious. They want to save power, save water. There are intelligent solutions which can help you to save that. So there are a bunch of trends, which are in favor. But even then, which means, you can actually see the market is growing, today, 15-16% CAGR, and people, project sizable market to $10-15 billion market by 2015. So there is a trend, but there are also barriers, for smart homes. The biggest, barrier is, even though it is cheaper than the past, even though we have Bluetooth, there are standardized wireless protocols, there are, cell phones, which are cheap. Even then, there are barriers, because many of the solutions which are being put together today are very proprietary. And there are, if you look at it, there are three kinds of segments. One is driven by the system integrators or telcos who have put together some kind of what do you call closed solutions, which which locks in a user. They can't change, mix and match the devices, or if they have to upgrade it, it is going to be extremely expensive. That is one problem. And second thing is the level of today these smart homes can be deployed and maintained only by skilled professionals. Either you need a service personnel or you have to be a geek yourself in order to make that happen. So these are some of the barriers which keeps it unusable, very hard for wider adoption and for scale, and also it keeps the cost extremely high. So this is the current status. What does the future look like for smart homes? So I think the ideal situation for a smart home of future is something where it is open for all, right? Where people could mix and match, bring in any kind of devices into the homes, and with a commonly understood protocol, communication or data protocol, they understand, they can bring it in. And different users, different segments of customers have different needs, and the needs vary from, in the same country, it may vary from one state to another, or it varies between countries. What are the drivers and barriers? So you need infinite customization. So there is need for the pace of innovation has to be rapid, where people can take these small segments and make a business out of it. So that piece is also highly desirable. The third part is still even a small shop which is running a couple of PCs, they require a lot of technical skills. So this network you are building, smart home network, has to be idiot proof. Anybody should be able to operate. And to use a technical term, maybe it should be self-healing and self-diagnosing, right? Somehow it knows how to heal itself, or contact a technical person, so that the human intervention is reduced to such an extent that people find it very comfortable. Of course, there are initiatives needed to make it more usable. Interfaces, right? Gesture-based, or people even talk about using thought to control, brain waves to control appliances, to make it so simple that anybody can use. Should not be complicated to operate. So those are some kind of technological barriers. But this overcoming technological barriers are not just enough. One of the points I want to highlight is also that there are downstream innovation that is required, especially in terms of business innovation. So somebody a small application developer, if they want to come in and build, then you need an ecosystem around it, where there is an open platform, there can be an app store, and how various people are going to share the revenue, figure out a model to share the revenue. That is going to be extremely important. And second part is also, even with that, it may be still very expensive. So there may be need for innovating on business models. So let me give you an example, right? In my home, the geyser, it stops working every 1 year because the water is poor. Water quality is poor. So if there is a monitor there, which can tell how your geyser is working, whether it is showing sign of some kind of a chemical formation on the heating element, right? It stops working. If you send it to a service technician, they can probably come and maintain that. Now the thing is, I may not be willing to pay for that, because I don't want to maintain an entire network and pay a monthly subscription for that. But there may be alternate model where maybe a telco can aggregate that and charge manufacturer, because the manufacturer can decide his warranty or the maintenance, annual maintenance cost based on this data they collect over a period of time from various sources. So it need not be a model where the end consumer pays. So there are business model innovation you can build around it in order for this to take off. And fourth, the fourth and most important part is actually the governance, because if this this network comes in and there are various players come in, primarily competitors, then if something conks off, like if there's a virus on your utility meter, who is responsible? Who will fix it? That is, the one question, the fixing the responsibility. Second part is, if the data is generated, how is it, the value of data and analytics is huge. How do you make sure it is fair to all the people, even the competitors, to come together? That kind of governance structure is also required, in order to make this successful.
Hi, my name is Malhar. One thing I wanted to know is, are there any current protocols which allow this communication of data between devices?
The appliance to the hub.
Yes.
So there are standards people talk about. Something like, one thing I'm not a deep expert on standards. Something like universal plug and play, right? There are those kind of standards which are there. But what if, and there are rival standards as well. The problem is there are too many standards. So I think the market might be built on some open layers, where where I feel this market is probably will go for 2 or 3 dominant standards. It's not going to develop in the internet way, where scientists created an open protocol and everybody jumped in. It may be developing in the more from a Blu-ray versus HDTV, right? There are industry-driven standards. People fight it out, and there may be for all there may be 2 or 3 dominant standards. One may be led by Microsoft, another may be led by Google with open elements, open standard elements plugged in. So it may take a middleware kind of approach.
Hello, I am Kirti from engineering, and my question is, the way I look at smart homes or smart cities, super system. And today what is happening is, in the edge devices or the technologies, each are independent. And is there any effort, because one of the barriers to have a smartphone is how do we integrate at a super system? And so the question is, what efforts have been made, or what platforms have been created? And that could be a good opportunity. So I just wanted to get your thoughts.
So I think there are a lot of standardization effort. There is not one. There are if you go through the literature, there are some European telcos. They are trying to create with a bunch of manufacturers. They're trying to create their own standards. So the challenge, they're coming back. The challenge still may be too many of those standards, for these devices to communicate with each other. It's not that so even 10 years back, I've heard of people trying to standardize this. So it's not emerging that way. When you look at the history, that kind of one dominant open standard which everybody agrees on doesn't seem to be happening. So I think it may be an alternative path, which it will take, where people who have the market share or who become a bigger player in market, they may actually set certain. It's like Microsoft Word. Are there alternate document standards? Better, maybe, but they have the share. They say so it become a de facto standard. So it may go down. Again, I personally feel it may go down that path.